Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to speak here today. I'm very pleased to be in Baltimore. I live in New York, and I'll explain why I'm pleased to be in Baltimore in particular over the next couple of minutes. In just a moment, I'm intending to share a challenge with you that I hope you as a community choose to rise to, but I feel like a word of introduction is necessary to start. As was mentioned, you're catching me at an interesting moment in my life. 4 weeks ago today, we welcomed our son Max into our lives. After being born in Manhattan and living in Brooklyn, this is actually his first trip to the mainland United States. So I have this timed tightly, so not much laughter, please. The experience of being a father I found is hard to encapsulate in one sentence, but for purposes of this speech, I'll share that it's been like wearing tinted glasses that make everything you're looking at just a little bit different. I'll ask you to think of the challenge I frame with the same frame. You don't have to stop doing what you do well. Please don't stop doing what you do well, but perhaps you can view it with a new tint also. So I'll start with the challenge, and then I'll take a step back. Be the first establishment community to drive innovation rather than be driven by it. The reason I'm pleased to be in Baltimore to deliver this challenge is I think this is the only town in North America that could actually achieve this goal. But let's stop and break this challenge down. What is Jewish innovation? I am the Executive Director of Slingshot. This is a copy of the book we produce. Slingshot is best known for printing this book. It's a Zagat-style guidebook listing the 50 most innovative things that happen in Jewish life across North America. We print and distribute about 7,500 copies, plus tens of thousands of downloads online. We also work with funders in their 20s and 30s to connect them to Jewish projects that they find relevant and engaging. So what do I mean by innovative projects? Do I mean new projects? No. Do I mean projects that take advantage of the latest technology? No, not necessarily. I'm looking for relevancy in Jewish life. In short, I want to know what makes sense for Jewish life in the 21st century. I'm led to believe that the Jewish community was different 50 years ago. We lived in the same place, we had similar needs, and the question of affiliation wasn't really a question at all. Despite the changes in the world and in the needs of our community, Jewish organizations did not always change with it. More or less, the same organizations that reached out to me on Long Island in the 1980s served my father in Crown Heights in the 1940s. Unsurprisingly, those organizations were less successful in achieving their missions. I grew up in a Jewish community that seemed to me to be more concerned about maintaining the tactical programs than about achieving their mission as organizations. These circles represent that problem. While the existing infrastructure serves some of the existing needs, a large part of our needs as a community are going unfilled. This opens a gap, let's call it the relevancy gap, that social entrepreneurs find themselves in. I had the opportunity, I'm thrilled to be here today to tell this story because I tell it across the country. I had the opportunity several years ago to go on a site visit at Kayam Farm at the Pearlstone Retreat Center. I hope that many or all of you have had a chance to spend some time there. As I mentioned earlier, I live in Brooklyn, so you are unlikely to find me on a farm. I did not have high hopes for this site visit. As I was getting my shoes muddy and wondering what this was going to have to do with Jewish life, I was told that Yakir explained that a Jewish farm uses values and laws from the Torah. For example, the corners of the field are reserved for charity. I said to myself, well, that's a neat object lesson in tzedakah for Hebrew school students, but He went on to change my life. He mentioned that every 7 years, farms practice a concept called Shemitah. They leave the land completely alone. I thought, wow, what a sacrifice for farmers to make. Unlike my experience to this point with religion, it's not sacrifice for sacrifice's sake. Or sacrifice because God said so. It's religion helping us do our jobs better and live our lives better. It's because in year 8, the land grows more. I thought to myself, what if I could do that? It would teach me spending discipline, for one, in years 1 through 6, knowing I was going to be taking a year off. And if I invested in myself in year 7, imagine what I could do in year 8. It's the concept of a sabbatical. Sabbatical, Sabbath, Shemitah. I never put it together before, and I stood there on the farm thinking, God, the Torah really knows what it's talking about. I wonder what else the Torah has to say. 10 years into my working life, I needed to hear about the Jewish idea of investing in yourself, a relevant use of the Torah, and it changed my life. Another example, things got bad in Detroit during the economic collapse. People who had never been poor were suddenly without health insurance. A project I love called Project Chesed arranged a network of donated care from Jewish doctors and hospitals, and they distributed Project Chesed health cards to uninsured Jewish adults, giving them the health coverage they needed. The community was responding to a change in the needs of the Jewish community. That's relevancy, and I get particularly excited about those programs. So, back to my challenge to you. Overlap these circles. While in much of the country we're seeing social entrepreneurs rise up outside of this system, I challenge Baltimore to put relevancy on the communal agenda and drive that process. The same entrepreneurs can work more powerfully inside this system, and the infrastructure that you've built over the last 100 some odd years can be put to 21st century use. Just to remind you of the challenge. Be the first establishment community to drive innovation rather than be driven by it. Okay, so my next highlighted words, establishment. Who is responsible here? Who am I addressing in this room? Well, you, if you want it to be. I suppose I'm aiming at the JCCs and the associated and synagogues, lay leaders, volunteers, but this groundswell is only going to work if the community puts it on the agenda at once. So if you'll take the challenge, I ask you to find yourself in this system. The reason I think this can work in Baltimore is because the population is here, the funding is here, and more importantly, the leaders I've met are primarily focused on the success of the community rather than defending their favorite tactical approach to community building. Baltimore is unusual, if not unique, in this respect, and I think you can prove it can be done. I'm assuming during the previous 30 seconds, you said to yourself, he's talking about me. I'm in. Now what? In my experience, I anticipate two questions. The first is, where is the problem? I encourage you to discover that the problem is not with the consumer. Around the time the iPod was released, Microsoft released an MP3 player called the Zune. In almost every way, it was better than an iPod. More durable, longer storage, you could share music between devices. You've never heard of it because nobody bought it. Microsoft stopped selling it. They didn't release a statement that I was aware of, blaming their customers for not buying a good thing. The problem wasn't with the customer. They also didn't close up shop. They figured out what they could sell. I apologize in this room in particular for my consumerist approach to Jewish life, but I believe our challenge here is often one of sales. So the second question, are the right people in the room? Among the most powerful innovations today, and one of my favorite projects is Moishe House. For the few of you who don't know about it, Moishe House subsidizes the rent on an apartment for 3 to 5 Jewish 20-somethings in exchange for the residents hosting a certain amount of Jewish programming. Programming used to be created in a boardroom, and the skill was marketing it so the right people would attend. Moishe House helped flip that model on its head, and they started with the right people, so whatever they do is right. It's cheaper this way also. When you're building programs, are the right people in the room with you? Are you listening to them? So where do we go from here? Well, you're going to have to tell me. I know one of the reasons my colleagues and I can mess around with farms and post-college frat houses is because the big ticket items are being covered. Mostly I mean taking care of the neediest among us. I hope that during your discussions today, during the open space, somebody brings up, if we're going to be successful as a community, we need to stop thinking about these programs in two categories and realize that we can't have one without the other. When thinking about our long-term success as a community, we need basic services and innovation to be operating hand in hand. Thank you very much for inviting me here today. It's been nice to speak to you.